So this verse is, I think, a very poorly understood verse. And I want to show you guys why. So, people quote this verse constantly, right? Boast in your times of trouble. It's like, but what does that mean? Right? It's like, what, like, why? Why should we boast in our time of trouble? And you read it and it's like, at first glance it feels obvious. It's oh, well, it produces endurance. All right, so that's why we should boast in our troubles, because it produces endurance. But what do we need endurance for? It's like, well, endurance produces character. It's like, oh, okay, well, character seems like a good thing. And then it says character produces hope. It's like, wait a minute, what the heck does character have to do with hope? Like, I could see how endurance would, or I could see how trouble would produce endurance, right? Having to go through a hard thing requires you to push through a thing that you wouldn't normally push through. So you have endurance. That seems like a good thing. Endurance producing character. It's like, okay, having to endure difficult things over time builds character, right? It's like, but why would I want to have character? Like, what is the benefit of having character? But then it gets weird. But character produces hope? How the heck does character produce hope? Like, how does character produce anything, much less hope? Right? That's a very strange thing. And then it says that the hope doesn't let us down because God's love has already been poured out for us in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. It's like, well, what does that have to do with any of this? Right? When you actually sit down and read this verse, the whole thing stops making sense after you get about halfway through it. And it just gets stranger and stranger as you go. When I looked at this, my initial thought was maybe it's like an issue of the Greek. Sometimes like you read stuff in the Greek and you realize like, okay, this didn't like translate well. And so maybe if we look at the Greek words, it'll make more sense. So the Greek word for suffering or trouble is thlipsis. Okay. And so thlipsis in Greek times would have been used as the concept of pressing olives. Right. So it's this concept of like a crushing pressure to release something. That's what thlipsis is. So when it talks about troubles, it's talking about this like crushing pressure that is intended to release something inside of the thing. It's intended to release what is in the olive, right? That's how you would think of that word thlipsis. And so when we talk about produces, this is interesting because we tend to think of it in terms of like the struggle that we're having. It is producing, as in it's it's like making endurance that wasn't already there. But in this context, it's actually releasing endurance. It's not making endurance. Okay, so you can now see why I'm saying this verse gets real funky when you start to read it through. So then you get to the next word, which is endurance. That word is hypomene, or hypomene. I'm not a Greek scholar, so working off the Strongs here, but you guys get it. So hypomene means steadfastness. It means remaining under pressure rather than escaping. All right. So this is an interesting thing. So basically, what we're saying is that the thlipsis, it's this crushing pressure that is intended to release something that is already there. That's what it's doing. And what it's releasing is this endurance, this ability to remain faithful. It's the ability to remain in the pressure without leaving. Okay, that's a very important part. Take note of that because it's going to mean something later. So the thlipsis produces hypomene, or let's use the word releases instead of produces because I think that's a more accurate way to understand this. So there is a crushing pressure that comes, that's the trouble. That crushing pressure releases endurance. Now, it says that endurance, so staying in that crushing pressure instead of abandoning it, it then releases something else. It releases dokime. Okay, dokime is character. Right. So if we're tracking this, we have troubles release endurance. Endurance releases character. Right. So character is the word dokime. Now this is the one that gets really funky. So the word dokime is actually in reference to a refining of silver. Okay. But it's not the process of refining silver. That's the thing. Like people get this wrong. Dokime is the finished state. It means that the thing has actually been proven to be genuine. So when it says Dokime, it's not saying that that it is character being refined. Dokime is fully refined character. And really, actually, a better way to say it is Dokime is the characteristic of what the thing already is, and that characteristic is entirely pure. So when silver has reached the state of Dokime, it means that it is entirely purified of everything. There's nothing like what is in it is fully purified, and there is nothing else. There's no other junk in there. Okay, so this process, when you're looking at it through these words, you have thlipsis, which is the crushing pressure to release something. The thing it releases is the hypomene, which is this endurance, this steadfastness, the ability to stay inside the pressure. And then when you stay inside the pressure, then it releases the dokime, which is the actual character of what was inside. So if you think about it like an olive, essentially, I can think of it like this. There's a crushing pressure that gets applied to the olive. That crushing pressure releases what's in the olive. And so let's say the olive oil comes out of the olive, right? When that olive oil comes out, if that olive oil is pure, then it is dokime. But it was the thlipsis that released each part of that process. It's releasing something. So you have to think of it like you're observing this process occurring to see what it's going to release. It's not a process that you're going through to make something. Rather, it is a process you are observing to identify what's inside. So now we have to move from character to hope. This is where it really gets crazy.